Hello and welcome to episode four. Episode four already. Episode four of the Top of Off podcast. And today we're going to be looking at day four of the first test between England and the West Indies at Southampton. So as usual, and as is becoming sort of the routine now, we are going to start with an overview of the day, which Jacob will present today, and then we'll get onto our talking points and what we want to discuss today. So Jacob, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, just a quick announcement before we start. On Tuesday, we're recording a special episode. It's not a test match day, but we will be in recording because a few of our millions and millions of fans have said that while they enjoy our banter, no abuse, just banter, but while they enjoy our podcast, they're not necessarily cricket experts. They're a bit new to the game, and so on Tuesday we'll be doing an introduction to cricket, just explaining what the hell we talk about, why we love the game, a few of the slang terms we use, just to make it more accessible to everyone who wants to, and help this be a place where people can learn about cricket as well as just hear about it.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing with that to say to you guys is that if you have people that you know who are interested in cricket or want to get into the game and don't know where to start or are having trouble with sort of engaging with the game, then get them to write into us and send us a tweet, and we can answer the questions that they have if they send those questions in, and you never know, we could get one of these people on the show as well and talk to them live and
one of these strange people.
Yeah. But definitely this is something that we want to do for you guys, is open this out so that it makes it a place that's friendly and welcoming for beginners, and even if you guys yourselves have any questions, send them in to us, and
if you want to hear our thoughts on anything, if
Yeah.
there's a particular issue you want us to talk about, you tell us. Second quick announcement: we announced on our socials earlier, and you can find us on all the normal places when you want to talk to us. But we're now on Apple Podcasts as well. We've just got our approval for that. Neither of us have Apple phones or Apple devices, but we are reliably informed by an Apple user that we are on Apple Podcasts.
Yep.
So just search the podcast name if you want, and if you have an Apple device, it should come up on your regular podcast provider. So, to the overview of the day. England were batting since last night. They carried a score of 15 for none overnight and resumed on that this morning. Then built a solid partnership between Burns and Sibley, finally falling with Burns going to a nice delivery from Chase for falling at 72 for one, Burns scoring 42 of those 72. Sibley was the next to go after another prolonged period, 113 for two, the fall of wicket on that one. Sibley, unfortunately for him, made his 50, got LBW, I believe. Bowled.
No, it was bowled.
He chopped it on.
Yeah.
And then it was revealed that Shannon Gabriel bowled no ball.
Yep.
Next ball after this reprieve, gone. Very unfortunately for Dom Sibley, I believe he was caught down the leg side again. Wickets began to pick up a bit after that. It took 40 more runs until Denley was the next to go for 29. Another start for him. But then a nice prolonged period. A fantastic innings from Zach Crawley saw him make 76 alongside Ben Stokes' 46 before Stokes was the first to fall at 249 for 4 for 46. Caught quite a soft dismissal walking across his stumps. Then Crawley gone at 253 for 5 on a score of 76. Caught and bowled Alzari Joseph. Butler then went for 9, Best for 3, and Pope for 12, meaning that England lost, I believe, 5 wickets for 30 in a fairly rare lower order batting collapse.
Yeah.
And now resume tomorrow morning with Archer and Wood not out for 5 and 1 respectively at 284 for 8, with a lead of 170 runs with 2 wickets remaining.
Yeah. So it's I mean, it's the best of times and it's the worst of times for England at the same time,
Yeah.
really. In that the top order did very well, and then sort of we had a middle order and sort of lower order collapse, and really the day up until tea was looking very promising for England, and then really since tea, been a bit more bleak for England, really.
It's just slightly tiring to continually report that England have lost 4 for 20 or 5 for 30, whether it's at the top of the order or the bottom. You know, it's these collapses which keep happening, and Butler has a part to play in this. Pope's been disappointing this match, given what we know he can do and how reliable he was in South Africa.
Yeah.
And then Bess, you know, he's not a batsman by trade, but he made 30 yesterday and then got caught out today quite easily. I think he was bowled actually, but
Yeah.
he didn't put up the greatest fight. Couple of nice shots from him, but it's a little bit of a collapse, which it was really just. It never seems to be at the right time. The collapse always comes precisely at the wrong time when we need to stay strong.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Whether that's in the top or bottom order.
Going away from the collapse just for a second, this was the highest England opening stand in England in 20 innings. So it's the highest that the openers have made playing in England since Cook and Jennings versus South Africa in the Lord's Test in 2017. So there is a bit of hope there, you know. And the question we got to ask is: did the England openers, Burns and Sibley especially, did they redeem themselves today? You know, given the duck that Sibley made in the last innings.
Sibley, yes, Sibley definitely redeemed himself, and I think redeemed might actually be a strong word in the sense that he probably didn't need to so much.
Yeah,
there was a bit of rust yesterday. It was a tricky pitch, and he missed one. But he's a very solid player, and he played very nicely today. You know, he probably should have kicked on, but I think he was obviously unsettled by the first dismissal.
Yeah,
He got that reprieve, and then it all went. Also, a bit of kiss of death from Nasser Hussain, who said Sibley's looking really set and solid, and even said that might be the kiss of death in the next ball.
And then he was gone. Yeah.
But yeah, I think Sibley did really well today. Burns as well. Saw an interesting statistic that Burns, I think, is the only person in the only English opener since Cook a couple of years ago to make over 30 or 40 in both innings.
Yeah.
And other than Cook, it's the first time since Strauss in 2012. So Burns is turning into this kind of very nicely consistent.
He is
opener. He has a beautiful.
He's got a mix really of Alistair Cook in his scoring, but also Steve Smith in his technique. And obviously, it's quite high praise to compare anyone to Steve Smith. But I say it in the sense that the way that he goes about his business of batting, you know, the quirks that he has, the very unorthodox technique is very reminiscent of Steve Smith. And then obviously he scores much like Alistair Cook does, you know, patiently and slowly and sensibly. So there's a lot of promise there. And we've said this the last few days as well, but there is definite promise there. And for the first time, I think, you know, there are still middle order collapses for England. And the number 3 position still needs to be worked out. But for the first time in a good few years, 1 and 2 in the batting order are sort of almost concrete. And, you know, there is some certainty there and there is some promise in that position.
Well, the number 3 position, which we will discuss a bit later, has gone some way to being filled today. But just staying on the openers for a moment, Burns, I think, despite his odd technique, I don't think it's an ugly technique. I think he's got a very kind of unusual but pleasing technique. Particularly, I always feel extremely happy about his straight drive and his off drive. The odd positions he gets himself in, but then as he makes contact with the ball, he's in this perfect driving position, straight back, hands flicking through it. It's really nice, and
Yeah.
he's delivering. He's becoming consistent. While he won't get 100 every game, he will get some runs.
Yeah,
And now
definitely.
with Sibley becoming more and more consistent, the exception of the first day, but throughout the South Africa tour and now with this match, he's become more and more consistent. And you can't underestimate how valuable it is to have, well, you can't overestimate rather the value of such a long opening partnership. And if these guys can gel together and start producing opening partnerships of above 50 on a regular basis, it makes particularly England's first innings batting, which is the trouble area, so much easier on everyone else, and can really get them to kick on. Because on a pitch like they had today, which is still relatively tricky, better for batting, but still quite tricky, they were on their way to making 300 before
definitely
collapse at the bottom. But all that groundwork was beautifully laid by Sibley and Burns and Crawley.
Yeah, for definite. And I mean, I think that the one thing that always strikes me with Rory Burns' batting is how he's not, he's not got, terrible back pains, and he's not in excruciating pain from the way that his stance just looks so uncomfortable. But obviously it works for him, and it probably wouldn't work for anyone else. But it works really well for him.
Well, the special thing about him is that he, unlike most left-handers, he's left-eye dominant, like a right-hander, which is why our viewers will be able to see this. Our listeners can imagine it. But you see when he's standing side on, he sort of looks over his shoulder like this. It's to get his left eye, which is usually obviously the dominant eye of the right-handed batsman. It's to get that lined up with the ball. So he kind of has to kind of bend across himself to get his dominant eye in line with his dominant hand. Which creates this very oddly shaped technique. But he's really pulled it off to perfection. And even
it's
more
works very well.
I think he's got the most unique technique in Test cricket, just because of how he's built as a cricketer.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree there. How would you rate England's batting performance today versus their first innings? And I think that there's a definite improvement over their first innings, given the fact that they're not 204 all out this time. But at the same time, it's exposed there are still considerable things that have to be worked on. So yes, the top order played their part today. Burns, Sibley, Crawley, Stokes as well. They all played their part. But there was a few players who didn't do as well as we'd expected them to. And it shows that this England team still has a bit of a difficulty in reacting to changing conditions. Once they're used to a certain pitch playing a certain way, it takes them a very long time to adapt out of that. And it's that sort of intuitive cricket, which isn't really there for them yet. And we see the best nations being able to do that, and the best players being able to do that. And I think that's definitely a weakness that, has been evident before and has been exposed before, but it's just been exposed yet again in this batting performance.
I think the question of intuition and adaptability was more of actually an issue on day one, which is why we had such a low score, because the pitch and the conditions have evolved to suit the batting which we needed to do today, actually. More so than they were. In terms of comparing the batting performances, leaps and bounds better today, so much better. And yes, the top order fired, but also well into the middle order. Ollie Pope has struggled for form this match. But other than that, everyone 1 to 5 did well. Other than Denley, but Denley absorbs some balls as Denley does. And when Root comes back in, as we'll discuss in a minute, that problem will probably be solved a little bit. But what you have to remember is this particular England side, quite a long tail. Bess is the last person who sort of can bat. there's not Wokes and Moeen and people like that who are more proven international bowling all-rounders
Yeah.
who you wouldn't expect this of. Buttler has been struggling for a while, and I don't think Buttler suits Test cricket, and I don't think Test cricket suits him. So I think we might see the gloves pass to Folkes relatively soon
Yeah.
in terms of this series,
Definitely.
maybe the next series instead. But I think the batting performance today was actually very good. I was very pleased with it. The opening stand obviously was great.
Yeah.
Zach Crawley played a sublime innings. Stokes really got the run rate up and could have had a good innings himself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Joe Root, when he comes back, he adds a little more experience and solidity to the lineup.
I think the key thing with this innings was the fact that it was very patient, and it was especially in the early sections of it. It was a very typical Test match innings, and that is something, it's surprising that we have to say it, but it's something we haven't seen from this England Test team. We haven't seen this Test innings and the knowledge of how to play a Test innings. And I think there was a stat, I can't remember it exactly, but we were 50 overs in and the score was just above 100 or something like that. And it was the scoring rate that you want to see from a Test team, and that shows you that this is a team that, especially in this innings, was valuing their wicket and not pushing at stuff and not playing shots that they shouldn't be played, leaving anything that was bad, and just picking up the balls that they knew they could score on. And that was something that should be basic, but hasn't been in the last few years. And it was really nice to see that today, especially from the top order.
And England got slightly unlucky in terms of selection, because there's really no way they could have predicted the pitch.
Yeah.
But this was a pitch which you were never really in on, and it was very difficult. Well, it's nigh on impossible to get a century on.
Yeah. I mean, we saw that today.
On tomorrow, but
yeah.
No one so far has got a century on this pitch. And so if your batting was such a long tail, but the most you can expect out of your first 5-6 is really 50s, 60s, maybe a 70, as we saw with Crawley today. He only got slightly into the 70s. He played really well. So if the most you can expect from each of your top 5 players is that, and none of them are going to kick on, then having such a long tail is just not the match for it. But that's not anyone's fault in terms of the selection. That's just how the pitch is shaped up.
Yeah, definitely.
Going forward,
I think that one thing we saw with that pitch was there was a moment in the game where Gabriel was bowling to Dom Sibley, and it wasn't a very short pitch delivery. It was quite full actually, but it just came up. It just bounced right up off the pitch with just some a really venomous bite, and it got to shoulder height and hit Sibley on his elbow, and actually drew blood, the delivery. But it shows this pitch is a really inconsistent pitch, and it is one that will have it almost has a surprise around every corner for a batsman,
which will make England's bowlers very happy, because going into day 5, what particularly struck me was that it seems to be a pitch which doesn't necessarily respond to any one thing, but responds to variation very well. So if Jofra Archer and Mike Wood, one of them's kind of a more hit the pitch and it'll bounce up bowler, and the other one's a bit more straight line and skiddy, that being Mark Wood. And the pitch will react very differently to them, despite the fact that they have similar pace. So I think Mark Wood in particular will look forward to a couple rearing up and a couple going very low. Going forward in terms of the selection of the team, actually, I don't mind having this slightly longer tail on the England team. I think having this more specialist bowling core is quite a good thing, because we've obviously seen England go the other way and kind of load the team with all-rounders. And as Kevil said yesterday, kind of average out at average. So I think really the batting performance today was as good as we could have hoped for on such a pitch. But the question is, that little collapse at the bottom, particularly Buttler and Pope's collapse, which really could have, if they'd both got 50s, we'd be in a hugely better position. But
Yeah,
those
definitely.
collapse at the bottom of the order, has England done enough? Do we have, and at the end of our
Yeah.
innings tomorrow, which will come in, you'd assume, relatively short order, do we have enough of a lead to put the time pressure on the West Indies? And either, because I think England at this point can win the game, but the draw is the most likely thing. And I think
I
England
do
are
think so, yeah.
I
But
think England
crucially,
are
I
going to
think
win the game. West
all,
Indies lose it, or there'll be a draw.
yeah, yeah.
So
I think all three results are still in play, but a draw is looking like it's the most likely one. But obviously, when we come back tomorrow to have our discussion of day 5, then we'll be able to see whether we were right in that assumption. But let's just speak a little bit about the pitch now that we've gone on to it. And the West Indies are going to be batting last on this pitch. And this is something that a lot of people assumed was the main rationale behind Ben Stokes' decision to bat first on day 1. It was this sort of assumption that the pitch will have deteriorated to the extent by day 5 that spin will be really conducive on it, and therefore it was in his interest, and he wanted to put the West Indies in last, and have Dom Bess coming from one end and then have our pace attack from the other end, so that you pressure them with the time pressure, and also they obviously have a decent chase, and they need to push on, but they also need to be wary of a pitch that is breaking down and deteriorating. So what do the West Indies need to do tomorrow to win when they do come into bat, given how the state of the pitch will change and has changed?
well, we were, as everyone was, quite critical the first 2 days,
Yeah.
particularly of Ben Stokes' decision at the toss. And we may I mean, we're amateurs of this game, but even professional pundits may come up looking very, very silly by the end of tomorrow if England
Yeah,
pull this off.
definitely.
And I think there is a decent chance of that, in that we saw the pitch today, particularly late in the day when the new ball was taken. Even after 10 or 20 overs of the new ball, the pitch was still doing things, and it seemed very conducive to seam movement, which is a team we've really geared it towards. Archer and Wood moving off the seam, and Jimmy's very good at that as well, as opposed to movement in the air. Basically, since the first day, there's been almost nothing in the air.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think the pitch could be tricky, and I don't know if the West Indies are in too much danger from the pitch at the moment, but they could be caught out. Dom Bess will be very happy to see, even early in the day when Roston Chase came on to bowl, there was one which went past Stokes' edge, big puff of dust, big turn on the pitch. And, there are a few footholes, very small footholes outside the right-handers off stump from right-arm bowlers coming round the wicket.
Yeah.
In terms of the impact spin's likely to have tomorrow, I think possibly more than a lot of the pundits thought, but slightly less than Ben Stokes thought, because it wasn't turning big today, but there was something out there. And what we have to remember is that the West Indies, in a move that slightly confounded England given their recent record, they only have one left-hander in their team. England have proved over the last year to be extremely good against left-handers, particularly Stuart Broad. But the fact that there's only one player really where for Best there are major footholes outside the off stump means that he might have to work a bit harder for his wickets. But there's definitely something there for the spinner and for the seamers. So I think the West Indies just have to come in. They don't necessarily have the luxury of batting time, so they have to score relatively quickly. But the main thing they have to do is finish England quickly tomorrow for not many. Don't let a tail ender get at 30 or anything, and then bat sensibly. They have to be able to score.
Because the question is, how should they approach their run chase? And this is I think, a question that even they will be asking themselves over the course of tonight and tomorrow morning. how do they go about this sort of run chase, given that now the element of the time pressure has been introduced because it's the last day, and they're up against a pretty decent England bowling attack, and we know that they can bat sensibly because they showed that in their first innings. But we also know that given their success in the short form, as we've spoken about over the last few days, they can bat aggressively and they can kick on if they need to. So where on this spectrum between sensible test batting and going all out in a T20 innings, where on this spectrum should they be tomorrow, and how should they approach this game?
I don't think that element of time pressure is there just yet, because what you have to remember is that the West Indies made their score in just about a day. I think if England's tail can, and I don't necessarily want them to score runs, if they can last an hour, if they can bat that time, not necessarily add to the scoreboard, but if they can just take an hour out of the game, maybe even an hour and a half, seems unlikely, I know, then the time pressure comes on for the West Indies. And it's not a case of England killing the game in that sense.
Yeah.
They're not trying to angle for the draw. What they're trying to do is make the West Indies have to try to win the game, make them have to come out and bat aggressively and provide those opportunities. So I think the key actually for the West Indies batting performance is their bowling performance immediately in the morning, and getting England out cheaply and quickly to give their batsmen as much time as possible to, yes, come in and score a little quicker than perhaps they did. And I think someone like Jermaine Blackwood will revel this situation because he has to come out and score quickly, which is what he likes. Holder as well. But I think probably they can do it. They just have to, as with any team on a fifth day, get that balance right between hitting it about and knowing which balls to pick. And England have to be very careful not to leak runs at all. They can't afford to be expensive in any sense. All the bowlers really have to go for under 3.
Definitely.
Ideally, and just try and not necessarily aim for the draw, but try and make the West Indies lose the game as opposed to winning it, which I don't think is really
again, it's probably a case of bowlers, being economical, not leaking runs, bowling tight. Don't look for the wickets, because I think the key tomorrow will be for the English bowling attack not to look for that magic ball that will change the game. Instead, bowl tightly and bowl economically, which will have the effect of frustrating the West Indies batsmen. And if you can frustrate them to the extent that they make a mistake, then you've got your wicket. And that's the thing, that they'll have to exploit the mistakes and exploit that sort of element of West Indies batsmen trying to hurry things along or trying to score. And if you can do that, then you're going to be in a pretty good position.
Because don't underestimate the impact of scoreboard pressure and the fact that they have a target, and if you continually frustrate them, they're going to want to try and kick on and they're going to get angsty at the crease. And so the wickets will come. The runs are the most important thing, because it doesn't matter if they're on their first wicket or their 9th wicket. If you give them runs, they'll win. You just have to get them to be frustrated, to be uneasy at the crease, and make them make something happen, as opposed to giving them the moments.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so where then do we think England's lead is going to sit at the end of this innings? I think personally that the lead will be, I mean, if the lead gets to 200, then they will have done all right. But I don't think it will be much more than 200. And the lead, it was looking at some points, especially before tea, like it was going to be above 200. And I don't think that's going to be the case now, or it's not going to be a lot above 200. So obviously, where will that lead be, and will it be enough? And how far has that 5 for 30 collapse? How far has that hindered England's chances of winning this game?
I think it's made the game very competitive as opposed to England being slightly ahead.
Yeah.
In terms of where their lead will sit tomorrow, I can easily see Jofra and Mark Wood and Jimmy putting on 15, 20 runs, all three of them
Yeah.
together as a cumulative, which would take the lead to, I think, 190 something.
Yeah.
Ideally, the West Indies would be chasing 250. But
Yeah.
if they have to chase 190, I think Ben Stokes will and his team will believe on a pitch like this, we can get them for 190 if they have to rush, if they have to try and make the 190, and we don't let them have anything.
Yeah.
So the lead won't extend too much in my prediction, which, as we have learned, are always wrong. But I doubt the lead will extend too much, and I think the key things tomorrow are just keeping, as we said, keeping the bowling tight, keeping the economy rate down, and creating pressure, and seeing how the West Indies can handle it. Because it is as well, if they win a Test match in England, which is the first one we'll have lost for quite a while now, I think, a couple of years, then that really puts them in a commanding position for the series and puts the pressure right back on England. Whereas if England,
I think actually the West Indies haven't won a Test in England since 2004 or something like that. So it's been a long while.
They won a Test in 2017 on their last tour. Headingley, they chased down 300 odd.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I'm wrong. There you go. I'm wrong.
In that match, in fact, Shea Hope became the only person at Headingley ever in an international game to score 100 in each innings. And only Sam Billings had done it in a county game, and he did it last year or something.
Yeah.
But yes, it will be. I think it's been 2 years since we've lost a Test in England or something like that.
Yeah.
And then it puts the pressure right back on England if they have to then fight back in this series. So the first Test obviously has some impact, and really, I think the pressure is what will tell.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, in terms of what they're going to need to do tomorrow and who's going to be the key for them, I would say that they're going to need to bat, and whatever runs Jofra, Mark Wood, and Jimmy can add to this total are going to be crucial, and they're going to be helpful. But the key thing is how they bowl tomorrow, and we've spoken about this before. The bowling is going to be key, and how they perform in the field is going to be what will decide this game, really. And it will be the same as you said, that the West Indies bowling at the start of the day is going to be the most crucial bit for them, because that will decide, that sort of early period of the day will set the tone for the rest of the day, and it will decide whether there is a time pressure there or whether there is a sizable total, or if it's there's a big difference between chasing a total of 190 and chasing a total of 200 or 210. And so that early period of the day for both teams. Sorry?
10 runs difference precisely. Big.
I mean, it is. These sort of barest margins are going to be what decides this game. And really, it's been a great advert for Test cricket in the sense that it's low scoring, and it hasn't been both teams batting for 2 days straight. But it's been because both teams have been low scoring and both teams' bowling attacks have are pretty talented. You've got a game that has reached day 5, firstly, that has all 3 results still in play, and also that has both teams wanting to desperately get the most out of day 5. So we're also going to see probably a full day of play on day 5, which is a rarity for Test cricket sometimes.
Make no mistake, it's actually been, just from an objective point of view, it's actually been a fantastic game of Test cricket. There's action around every corner, and it's not been as exciting as the Ashes was, because of course it was the Ashes. You got that sense when Labuschagne and Smith came to the crease we're in for a while here.
Yeah, no, that's it.
It's going to happen. There's never been any of that. It's because it's been such a low scoring game, and the ball and bat have been relatively evenly matched in the sense that there have been long periods where batting has been easier, and then suddenly the ball has come back into it. It's been a great match.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I'm looking forward to the two at Old Trafford where the pitch won't be so slow, and we'll really get some kind of
pace,
a show off of pace bowling, really, which is what this series was cracked up to be.
It's going to be brilliant. It's going to be a really great exhibition of pace bowling when we reach Old Trafford. It's something to look forward to for sure. And maybe there, because Old Trafford is a bit of a faster pitch and it has quite a fast outfield as well. Maybe we're going to see there a bit of an increase in the scores for both teams, and we'll see a bit of a higher scoring game. But that'll be interesting. And again, that's all speculation, and we've been proven wrong probably 90% of our predictions so far. So
we have no idea what the pitch at Old Trafford is going to be like. We're just talking what it traditionally is, which is quicker off the surface, bouncier. It spins a bit more. It's generally quite a good pitch, and it could be a flat road for all we know. It could be like Mount Maunganui in New Zealand, where it's just 4 days bat.
Yeah.
But when do you want to declare is really the answer. Is really the question, even.
Definitely.
But,
it is a shame though that there's no tests at Trent Bridge this year, because pace bowling at Trent Bridge, with both of these teams, that'd be a real treat. But
it's a real shame, but I think obviously the COVID situation has put pay to that, as it has everything. But
that's it.
We'll definitely see the West Indies back in a couple of years, and I think we do go to them next, obviously. But and cunningly, as we mentioned, we're also due to go to Pakistan next now. But India in the winter, next summer even, that will probably be Trent Bridge and everything. And India have got the number one pace attack in the world right now, so
that's going to be really, really it's going to be a great game to watch. That but obviously that's in the future. So talking about the here and now, there's a big question, and that is the question of the Joes.
And
the Joes and Zach. But the question of the Joes works a bit better. So the question of the Joes, as everyone is aware of it, is when Joe Root comes back, what happens to Joe Denley? And does his performance today, coupled with Zach Crawley's success, as we've said, mean that his position in this side is in jeopardy?
Well, I think the telling thing in this scenario is that your question was what happens to Joe Denley and not what happens to Zach Crawley. Really, Joe Denley has shown consistently that he is a man who, for whatever reason, whether it be technical or psychological or whatever, he will only ever get 20 or 30 runs and will go out. James Vince had a similar problem when playing for England in Test cricket. Denley, also being 34, I think really has done himself no favours today getting out for 29. When Zach Crawley, 21 years old, much higher ceiling in terms of potential and longevity with this England team, getting on pretty much exactly the same pitch. I think he batted with Denley for a bit.
Yeah, he did.
Making his 73. That's really telling. And the fact that he scored quicker than Denley and batted so confidently on the same surface means I think you can't really question it now. Denley's got to go in the next test, and I'd say Zach Crawley at 3,
definitely,
and Root at 4, particularly when you consider that Crawley statistically does better and better the higher up the order he goes.
I mean,
it's like career best score today.
I'm in full agreement there that Joe Denley's time has come, and I think the key thing really, and something that has been spoken about, but obviously hasn't been given as much attention as I think it should, is that he's 34, and if the sad fact is, if Joe Denley was a younger player, then you could say that, well, it's this lack of experience, and he has the time to change his game and develop his game to get past that sort of psychological hurdle that he has of getting to 20 or 30 and then getting out. However, given that Joe Denley is 34, you've got to be realistic about it. There is not much more development that is going to happen with his game. And the time it will take for that development to happen will mean that if it does, by the time that it does, he's going to be too old to play for England anyway. And it is a sad fact, but the reality is that when you're building a team for the future, and when you're building a team that you can develop and that has potential, then a player like Zach Crawley, even if Joe Denley had made had made a double hundred in this test, even then he wouldn't have been included going forward. After this summer, because of the fact that you need younger players.
The two things that have really hurt Denley's chances in this match are, first of all, Zach Crawley's performance today, which was excellent, and he played extremely well, and is now the match's top scorer, being a 21-year-old with 6 or 7 tests under his belt. Fantastic.
He's basically the same age as us. That says a lot. We're sitting here chatting about it, and he's there actually doing it.
The other thing is, on the other side, the West Indies side, there's Shamar Brooks, who is a similar age to Denley. He's 31, I think. He's played 4 tests, so he's similar to Denley. He's only just come into the side relatively recently. He's a bit where Denley was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And he came in, and on day 2, on a pitch which was trickier than the one Denley had today, came in and made 34 and made it look quite easy and looked very comfortable against Jimmy Anderson, when Denley had made 18 and then got bowled in exactly the same way he's been getting out repeatedly in his last few innings. So both those comparisons of someone at a similar stage of the career doing better and not necessarily scoring more, but just making a trickier pitch look easier.
Yeah.
And then also a younger guy gunning for his spot, vastly outperforming him and making, again, it look a lot easier than Denley did and looking technically more at ease. So really, I think Crawley at 3, Root at 4 is the way to go for the next test, because Denley,
definitely,
even just from the point of cold hard statistics, he doesn't statistically have the potential to give you 100. You're not going to get it from him because you just have never got it from him.
I think the other thing to say is that a lot has been said about Denley's ability to, he doesn't make 100, but he soaks up 100 balls. And a lot has been made of that. And it's one of the things that you can say in his defense. And I mean, the thing to remember is, though, that Zach Crawley also faced 100 balls today and made 72 in the process. And Burns and Sibley both faced, I don't think Burns faced over 100 balls, but Sibley definitely faced over 100 balls today. And Burns faced over 50. So our top 3 anyway, at the moment, is facing over 100 balls, but has the runs to support that. And so they add that extra bit to the game, which is that they get top order runs as well. And Joe Denley is a lovely guy. And, he's spoken of very highly by everyone who's around him in that team, but you have to also be performing. And that's the simple truth of that.
Probably time to make way for Crawley, and the team's only big enough for one Joe. So,
it can't be an average Joe.
No, it must be a Joe averaging at least 40, preferably. But I think that's pretty much settled the debate on that today. It's got to be Crawley going forward, and if Stillwood and Ed Smith don't pick it that way, I think there'll be a lot of scratching of heads until Joe Denley is picked for the next Test match and makes a double 100 in both innings, in which case, what do we know?
That's it, exactly. Saying that, I mean, Zach Crawley did very well today, but there is this sort of not a dearth, but there is definitely I don't know what the correct word would be, but there is a school of sort of very talented, very promising young English batsmen coming through. So Dan Lawrence is another example. A crop. There you go. Yeah. There you go. That would be the word. There's a crop of talented, promising young English batsmen coming through. So Dan Lawrence is another example to go with Crawley and also Sibley and Burns. And
Bracey, who we mentioned a couple of episodes ago.
Yeah, exactly. It would be interesting to see Lawrence and Bracey, whenever they get their debuts as well, or, if they do get a chance in this team, be interesting to see what they can do, because they've been very promising, especially within the county setup. And they looked in good touch in the inter-squad game that happened last week as well. So, there's definite promise there for England as well. So we're looking quite good for the future, as long as we can sort out this sort of mental aspect of getting into the rhythm of a test innings. But it will come. It will come, I'm sure.
It was interesting to see those two in the warm-up game.
Yeah.
Because something which we saw from that, I think, didn't Bracey get 85 and
he was actually the top scorer in that game.
Dan, forgotten his name now. What's his name?
Dan Lawrence.
Dan Lawrence. Didn't he get 60 something?
He did very well.
So what we didn't know then, but with the benefit of hindsight can see, actually, if you look, the pitch was very similar, and the results from the pitch, everyone else pretty much getting a low score. Dan Lawrence top scored with 85, but everyone else got out pretty cheaply.
Yeah.
And that trend has continued through to the test match. And it just seems that if those two guys on pretty much the same pitch which we encountered on day one, which was tricky, were top score, and day two rather, were top scoring with 80 something and 60 something, Bracey particularly, which would have been a top scorer in this game, against a good bowling attack, that was really good to see and very promising to make such a tricky pitch, now looking back on it, look so comfortable and easy to score on. That's a really good sign for the future of English.
Oh, definitely. Batting. And I think they probably need a bit more exposure to top level cricket, and probably a little bit more time in the county setup would be good. But for the future, and especially thinking forward to the Ashes in 2 years, or even the Ashes after that as well, they're going to be very promising, and they're going to be good prospects coming through for this English team. Okay, so we've spoken a lot about England today. We've settled the question of the Joes. We've spoken about Dom Sibley, Rory Burns, England's bowling. They collapsed today. We've spoken about the pitch as well. So let's have a look a bit at the West Indies as well, because we need to focus on the West Indies also. And their bowling performance today started not very promisingly. It started with England scoring and not losing wickets. And they got to 100 for 1 or 100 for 2, something like that. But then really after tea, especially between lunch and tea, but also especially after tea, the West Indian bowling attack really came into their own and really started firing on all their cylinders again. And so I want to look at Roston Chase, because we've spoken about spin. How effectively was Roston Chase used today? Because he did take 2 wickets, but how effective do you think he was?
Quite effective. I think he was used well, and he played well. Also, someone we haven't mentioned, the part-time bowler Craig Brathwaite, who turned his arm over a few times, bowled some good balls. He got one big, turning big outside Stokes' off stump and made Stokes look a bit in trouble. There was a review on it. So both the spinners were used quite well. In general, for the West Indies bowling performance, it was tricky for them today, and it was tricky conditions for bowling, especially once the ball got older. It's interesting to see if you compare today and day 2, you can always tell when conditions have been tricky for bowling, I think, because when they're good, generally the top 2 bowlers share the wickets between them.
Yeah.
And then as we saw on day 2, and then they're a lot more shared around,
Yeah,
as we
definitely.
saw with England and today with the West Indies. Poor old Kemar Roach coming in as the senior bowler on tour, and I believe he's still wicketless.
Yeah, he is.
But, Alzari Joseph got in the game today. Roston Chase did. Still, Holder and Gabriel pulled a lot of weight, but it was shared around a lot more, and that's a sign that perhaps you're out there longer. Everyone needs
Yeah.
to push on a bit more. When if you look at England's greatest bowling moments and some of their greatest bowling innings, you'll see a lot of the time it was 10 wickets shared between Anderson and Broad, and
Yeah.
no one else really got the chance to get in on the game.
I mean, arguably England's best bowling performance was Broad's 8 for 60 against Australia in the Ashes, and that was at Trent Bridge. But yeah, so yeah, I see what you mean, where the senior bowlers or the best bowlers on a good bowling surface, especially in England, will take the majority of the wickets, and maybe one or two will fall to the other bowlers. But here it was, it was sort of, it read 4-3-2-1 almost, in terms of the bowlers' scorecards. I would say though that Shannon Gabriel has been really good for the West Indies this tour, and he's really coming into his own as a bowler as well. And we know that he has some genuine pace, so he hasn't shown it in this test, but I mean, it hasn't been the conditions for it. And as we said, looking forward to Old Trafford, I'm really going to be interesting to see when he does fire up and go for the pace that we know he has, how he's going to perform.
Yeah, he bowled very well, and Holder as well bowled very well
Yeah.
today. The two senior bowlers really did. Gabriel particularly, he used across this test match, he's used the crease fantastically.
Yeah.
And delivered from wider and then tighter to the stumps, just to create that angle when there's not a lot going on with the ball. Holder's someone who does that as well. Holder today taking Stokes' wicket again, that had to feel good for him. He's 2-1 up now in the captain versus captain
Yep,
battle.
definitely.
And
There's an
you have
interesting
statistic on that, don't you?
Yeah. You can tell I'm really looking forward to this. So Jason Holder, the moment he took Ben Stokes's wicket in this innings, that was the moment he became the only Test captain ever to have taken the wicket of the opposing Test captain in both innings of the same Test match, and no other Test captain has ever done it. So the interesting thing that we were talking about today, speculating again when we were texting each other, was if Stokes takes Holder's wicket tomorrow, then suddenly Holder and Stokes become the first two captains to ever achieve this feat, and they do it within the first in the same Test match. And then, if that happens, potentially you have a situation where they become, as a pair of them, they become the first two captains to have ever taken each other's wickets twice in the same Test. In the history of Test cricket, which is pretty brilliant.
Would be quite impressive, and perhaps our question for the day can be: do you think it will happen? And how do you think, if you think Ben Stokes will get Jason Holder out, how do you think he will get him out? Tweet us #TOOPod or message us on various social medias. Email us at topofoffpodcast@gmail.com. Give us your view. No one has given us views so far.
No, they haven't. We're feeling very left out here. We sit here and
answer our questions. Tweet in your questions for the special on Tuesday and just in general.
Yeah,
but yes,
definitely.
It will be very interesting to see what happens between Stokes and Holder, not just in this game, but across this series, because
definitely
it's the number one and number two all rounder in the world battling it out. It's fantastic.
It's sort of this sort of Stokes Holder battle is reminiscent of, they're two players who are both all-rounders, and they're the two best all-rounders in the world, so they have similar skill sets. This is reminiscent of, when India come and tour, when we go and tour India, it's reminiscent of a Root Kohli battle, where they're two great batsmen going against each other, or a Root Steve Smith battle where the same thing is happening, or a Kohli Smith battle, or Root Williamson. It's that sort of matchup of players who excel at the same aspect of the game, getting to play against each other and test their skills in that same aspect of the game against another player who is also the best in the world. It's really interesting.
Root Williamson, which we saw in New Zealand, that was an
Yes.
interesting contest because they're such similar players as number 3, number 4 batsmen. Root was number 3 at that point, I think. So that's always interesting. Kohli and Smith are so kind of unique in themselves that it's hard to compare people.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Kohli, unique in his greatness, and Smith unique in both his greatness and technique. So yeah, but I think it'll be a very interesting battle, and all we need now is to see in the final round, after Jason Holder battled him recently, I think last year in the West Indies, we need to see Stokes against Shakib Al Hassan of Bangladesh, who is somewhere like 3rd or 4th in the. I think he's probably 3rd in the all-rounder stakes because he's seriously good.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see those battles. Okay, star player and moment of the day today.
All the usual stuff, and the one word to describe the day.
And your one word as well.
Okay, so star player. Let's start with the West Indies. Star player from the West Indies side today, probably Roston Chase. In that this was the first time he got into the game. He took 2 quick wickets. He kept pressure on. Special mention to Shannon Gabriel for his consistent performances, but Roston Chase for getting in the game thus far, and keeping that pressure. Star player from England, Zach Crawley. Just with top scoring in the match, making it look so good. A couple of really beautiful shots off Chase, advancing down the pitch and kind of that was on YouTube, me kind of sticking my tongue out and looking very confused, whacking him back over his head and after coming down the pitch. So I think, Crawley's definitely the star player. Moment of the day, I think I'm going to have to, again, slightly cheat. A shout out to a beautiful on drive by Crawley and another one by Stokes, actually. Particularly Crawley's one, just back past Jason Holder, I think it was. That was a shot of the day, we can call that. Moment of the day, probably Crawley's 50. Actually, no. Moment of the day, Shannon Gabriel's no ball to get Sibley out because of the drama factor. One word to describe the day. Tense. Even. Very even.
Yeah, definitely.
And yourself, star player, moment of the day, one word.
Star player for the West Indies, I am going to say Shannon Gabriel, because in my view, he has stopped the West Indies from falling out of this game and being left behind by England. He stopped England's middle order and from taking the game away from the West Indies and really pulling away. So I'm going to mention Shannon Gabriel for the West Indies. For England, it's going to be Zach Crawley. He's shown why he's in this England team. He's shown that the chance they took on him in Root's absence was the right one, and he's really made the most of that opportunity that he got, because this was his opportunity to prove himself, and he made the most of that. And then what's next?
Moment of the day.
That's it. Moment of the day. Moment of the day. I would say when Zach Crawley hit Chase back over his head for 4, because he did it twice, both on 2 different sides of the pitch. Brilliant. It was really good shots, and also they're just a few of the amazing shots that he played today. He played some beautiful shots, and Stokes as well played some great shots. But that sort of moment where he hit Chase back over his head, advanced down the pitch, it showed that yes, he can play restrained, but also he saw the opportunity when the ball was short and wide, and he saw, this is a bad ball, and he pounced on it. So that would be my moment of the day. One word to describe the day. I am going to say knife edge. it is on a knife edge.
We'll
I was going to say
crowbar that into one word.
it's a compound word. It has a hyphen in between. It's fine. Don't worry. But also, I was going to say promising first. In terms of England's batting performance was promising. Especially the top order, and the West Indies bowling performance eventually showed promise as well. But I think that given the fact that anything can happen going into this fifth day, it has to be this sort of aspect of how tense it is that's the key.
Excellent. Well, thank you all very much for listening to the Top of Off podcast. Please tune in tomorrow for our recap of the fifth and final day,
Yep.
and the result finally of the first test between England and the West Indies. And also tune in on Tuesday for our big beginners special. Bring your friends, bring people who might be interested in cricket, tell them about it, share it.
And remember, with that one, please send in your questions.
Yes,
and please get the people that people who want to get involved in cricket, get them to send their questions in, because we need that to make this show happen, and we'd really like to know and we'd really like to be part of their journey into cricket and help them get into the game, because it's a great game.
Yes, so tune in on Tuesday, please. Bring your friends.
Yep. And remember, you can tweet us at hashtag TOOpod. If you like us on Facebook, you can respond to our Facebook posts, and you can send us messages on Facebook as well. And then you can also email into us at topofospodcast@gmail.com. So there's no excuse not to get in touch with us. We've got loads of avenues for you to do it.
Important to mention as well, if anyone's nervous about sending in a question, worried they're gonna I don't know, they might think that they might look stupid or have a stupid question, I think just as a policy we'll read out the questions anonymously. And then you can put in your question if you wish to be identified and get a shout out, but just unless you tell us otherwise, we'll read them anonymously so that no one feels, oh, it's too stupid a question, because there isn't such thing as a stupid question.
There really isn't.
And if there's something you don't understand, ask us. We live for this rubbish. Please do ask. So we'll read them all out anonymously, unless you want to shout out, in which case just tell us. Yeah,
for sure. So that concludes our show today. And we hope you enjoyed it as much as we do recording these. Thank you for giving us your time listening to us. And we will see you tomorrow for our special end of test match overview. Thank you very much, and see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye.